I'm going to talk about a topic here that's a little bit difficult to talk about, and you'll see why I say it's difficult. But I think it's a very important topic because when I look back at all the many years I've been on a spiritual path, I can see that this topic is one of the main reasons why people get disappointed with the spiritual path in general, with a particular guru, a particular spiritual movement or teaching. And it's the main reason why people don't get the results they want from their engagement with the spiritual path. And so I think it's important to at least approach the topic. And I don't see a lot of talk about it out there in books or videos, so I think it's something that is often overlooked. So that's another reason to talk about it. So if I was to condense the topic in a nutshell, it would be balance, or rather lack of balance. But what does that mean? I mean, I realize that's a very abstract topic. So let's try and make it a little more concrete. A couple of years ago, we had the corona crisis, the pandemic. And not so long before that, we had the, actually after that, we had the 2020 election in the United States. And I had some people that I had known for many years, some of them over 20 years, that had been on a spiritual path, been in spiritual movements, been very eager, very steadfast in applying spiritual teachings, practicing spiritual techniques. But some of these people reacted very strongly to these two events. Some firmly believed in the claim that the election was stolen from Trump and that he actually won the election and that he should be president. Some were very attached to him being president. Others believed in the vaccination, what do you want to call it, the attitude that vaccinations were bad, that they were an attempt to do various things, and they resisted vaccinations. And please try to understand one simple thing here. It's not my intent whatsoever to debate these issues. It's not about these two issues. What I'm trying to show here is that people, after having been on a spiritual path for a very long time, got pulled into these very strong reactions. And my main question at the time was simply this. Given that you're a spiritual person, that you've been on a spiritual path for so long, why is this so important to you? Why do you have such a strong opinion about this? Why do you have such a strong reaction to this? I've also over the years seen people who, like most of us, grew up without any awareness of the spiritual path. They find the spiritual guru, they give their trust to the guru, they follow the guru, and after some time they begin to question, they begin to feel disappointed. And now they flip. It's almost like this you see in these love-hate relationships, where somebody claims to love somebody, then they get disappointed, and now they hate that person. You see it in many divorce cases, for example. So now they flip and they become very negative towards the guru, almost hateful towards the guru, blaming the guru for all of their problems. And again, it's not about the guru. It may be that the guru was a false guru or he was an abusive guru or whatever. But my point again is, why such a strong reaction? You see, I'm talking about balance here. And can you say that if you take this very strong reaction, this very black and white, I'm right, everybody else is wrong that don't agree with me, can you say that's balanced? That's my only point for raising this and to make it more concrete for people, because I'm sure that most spiritual people have had friends or family who in the last few years have been pulled into very strong reactions about various topics. There are so many topics in the world right now that are really pulling on people to act in this black and white way where they say this is the right view and everything else is wrong. So that's why I want to talk about balance. And let's just look at why is this happening right now. Because if you go back 5 years, 10 years, I don't think societies were as polarized as they have become in the last few years. I don't know if you agree with this, but if you do, then we can ask the question, why is that? And what the Ascended Masters have actually said is that it's simply because we are accelerating in this transition between, first of all, the Piscean Age and the Aquarian Age, but also moving closer to Saint Germain's Golden Age. And as a result of this, people have to work through issues that they haven't been willing to work through previously. So that's why, in a sense you could say that if you take a dark room where everything is dark, you can't really see anything. Then you increase the light. Now everything becomes this twilight zone where you can't really see clearly, but you can see there's something there. Then when you increase the light another degree, now you have these deep contrasts between areas with light and areas that are still in the shadow. And then if you increase the light even more, then the shadows disappear and you can now see clearly what was hiding in the shadows. So we are right now in this phase where things are becoming more contrasted, more polarized, more black and white, more extreme. And the Masters have actually said that in the coming years and decades, people will be forced, simply by the spiritual light, to react more strongly in order to act out their unbalanced beliefs so they become more obvious. And so that people can hopefully come to a point where they see that it's unbalanced and they seek for a balanced view. So this, if you are a spiritual person, you can look at it and say, why is it important for you to consider balance? Because if you don't, you are likely to be pulled into one of these very strong reactions, and that is going to delay your spiritual progress. Because spiritual progress is and must be based on balance. Now, balance isn't a compromise between the black and white viewpoints. I have a series of talks about ego illusions, and I have one talk where I talk about black and white thinking, and one where I talk about gray thinking. And what I say is, in the duality consciousness, there are always these two opposites, opposite polarities. So there are always opposite viewpoints, but there's, even when you step back from the actual viewpoints, there's two reactions. There is the one extreme, one polarity is black and white thinking, where you think truth is very simple. This is the truth, everything else is the lie. Every issue can be approached in this simple way. Here's the truth, here's the lie. Then the opposite polarity to that is gray thinking, where you go in and say, oh, it's like the people who say, well, we can't really know what truth is. So we can't really have these strong opinions. We have to always look for a compromise. And these are two dualistic polarities. It's not that one is right and the other is wrong. They're two dualistic polarities. They're imbalanced. And they will, if you are pulled into them, prevent you from making maximum spiritual progress. And I'll explain why that is later. So think about this. Right now, the world is in a position, or in a phase, where there are all of these polarized viewpoints that are pulling on you as a spiritual person. But what was the Buddha's main tenet, main idea? The middle way. Now, the middle way is, as I said, not a compromise between two dualistic extremes, what the Buddha called the pairs. It's transcending the extremes. So that means transcending both black and white thinking and gray thinking. That's how to make maximum progress. So I'm just putting that idea out there because I see many spiritual people, and it's understandable. I'm not blaming anybody for it. I did it myself for several years. But I see many spiritual who go into this, they find a spiritual teaching and think, here is the absolute truth. Here is the final truth. This teaching says it how it really is. And this is now, when I understand this with my outer intellectual mind, I have the highest truth. And I did this myself for a number of years. And it took me quite some introspection, some willing to look at myself before I realized this wasn't the highest approach. And so, what I want to say at this point is this. If you resonate with anything I'm saying here, you need to consider balance. Because you can say that the spiritual path, Jesus even talked about it 2,000 years ago, the straight and narrow, that we might have been indoctrinated with when we were kids. But the spiritual path is really like a balancing act, where you are walking on this beam, and if you lean too far to one or the other side, you're going to fall down. You can climb up again, of course, but nevertheless, if your spiritual path is that you walk a few steps on the beam and then you fall to that side, you climb up again, you walk a few steps and then you fall to the other side, obviously that's going to delay your progress as opposed to you're just walking on the beam. Now I'm not saying the beam is this narrow, it could be wider, but I'm still saying no matter how wide the beam is, if you lean too far off one edge, you're going to fall down and you have to climb back up. And perhaps you're going to roll around down there for a while before you are able to climb back up and find the beam again. So the beam I'm talking about is the beam in your own eye, by the way. So where you're willing to look at yourself and see what is it in my psychology that's stopping my spiritual progress. And what I'm saying is what it is in your psychology is that you have a certain imbalance that allows you to be pulled. You know, there's something pulling on you from the world that's pulling you into these extremes. So the next image I want to give you is that there is the story of Gautama Buddha. He had reached very high level of consciousness. He was ready to go into what the Buddhists call nirvana. But he had one final test he had to be exposed to. He was sitting under a tree in meditation, and the story is that the demons of Mara, this world, it's what Jesus called the prince of this world. So the demons of Mara were parading before the Buddha. And what they were really trying to do was to get him to react to anything in this world. Because if he had something in this world that he reacted to, whether something he felt he hadn't done, he hadn't experienced, something he needed to correct, something that was wrong, that was unfair, that was not right, if he had any reaction to the demons of Mara, he wouldn't have been ready to go into nirvana. Because nirvana means leaving the earth behind. So you see what I'm saying? Ultimately, the goal of spiritual growth is that you reach a state of consciousness where the demons of Mara, the prince of this world, the people of this world, the opinions and ideas and ideologies of this world don't have any pull on you. Now this doesn't mean you don't have any viewpoints or opinions. I will return to that. But what I'm saying is, as long as you have an unbalanced approach, the demons of Mara have something in you whereby they can pull you off the beam and you fall down and you're rolling around down there until you can climb back up on the beam, and then you can start walking again. So I have seen this over the years, and of course I've done it myself. You find a spiritual teaching, you find the idea that there's a spiritual path, and for a while you are walking on the beam, you are making progress. But then people get pulled into this unbalanced direction, and now they fall off the beam, and now they're crawling around in the dirt, in the mud, in the quicksand, and it takes a while before you get back to the beam. For some people, it can take decades. Some people don't make it in their lifetime. They keep rolling around down there and can't get back to the beam. And so what is it that gives this imbalance? Well, on a very practical, down-to-earth way, we can say, I've talked about this in many videos, how in our subconscious minds, we have what I call these subconscious selves that are based on the illusion that we are separate beings, and the illusion of separation is based on the duality consciousness, which always has the two polarities. So we have a subconscious self, and it's like a reactionary pattern, right? So let's say that you have a subconscious self, like many of us do, that if you have somebody accusing you of something, you go into defending yourself. Very common. I've met very few people, myself included, who didn't have that pattern. You're accused of something, even a hint that you haven't done, there's something you haven't done that was right, you go into defending yourself. That's a reactionary pattern. And it's simply that you step into this subconscious self, and now it takes over your reactions. And now you can only continue to defend yourself until you feel that you have disproven the accusation. And it's very, very common in relationships. One partner says something that the other partner sees as an accusation. It may not actually be, but the other person sees that as an accusation. Now goes into being defensive, accuses the first person back. Now the first person is triggered into a defensive reaction and accuses the second person even more, and then it just goes back and forth. And once that dynamic has started, you're off the beam. I mean, you're rolling around in the mud. And, it's just a matter of how long does it take before you get back to the point where you can look at the beam in your own eye and say, why am I reacting this way? Why am I reacting? And what I'm saying is, when you've been on the spiritual path for a while, I'm not saying people can do this when they're new to the path, but when you've been on the spiritual path for a while, you have to not only ask yourself, why am I reacting this way? You have to start asking yourself, why am I reacting at all to anything on earth? Because the goal of spiritual growth at the higher levels of the path is that you come to a point where you have no unbalanced dualistic reaction to anything on earth. You are not reacting through one of these selves that are based on the duality consciousness because you have let those selves die. But the only way to let them die, as I explained many times, is you come to see them consciously, see they're based on an illusion, and you consciously give up the illusion. But if you haven't started looking at the fact that you have these selves that causes you to go into an unbalanced reaction, well, you haven't gotten to that level of the path. You haven't even really started the higher levels of the path, no matter how sophisticated you might think based on having an intellectual understanding of an outer teaching. So, I have several videos where I talk about the subconscious self, so I won't go too much into that here, because if it resonates with you, you can look up those videos. But what I will say is that any time, and I really mean any time, you find yourself having a strong reaction to anything on earth, that reaction comes from a separate self. And it is going to pull you away from making maximum spiritual progress, because it pulls you off the center, it pulls you off balance, pulls you off the middle way, and, it just delays your progress. And if you're really dedicated to spiritual growth, I mean, look at it. What is the goal of spiritual growth? I mean, there can be various goals, okay? There can be two types of goals. One is you want to qualify for the final exit from earth, the final exam, your ascension. The ascension is a process where you leave everything behind. Before you can ascend, you have to take a long look. Basically, you have to sit under the tree like Gautama Buddha. And the demons of Maya are going to parade before you. If it can pull you into any kind of reaction, you're not ready to ascend, because ascending means leaving the earth behind forever. Whatever the earth, whatever state it may be in, whatever is unfinished, whatever you haven't done and haven't experienced, you're leaving it all behind. And you can't do that if you have one of these, what the Buddha called attachments. And the attachments come from these subconscious selves. So if you have any attachment, you are not free to leave. You will be pulled back into embodiment. The other motivation for walking the spiritual path is that you want to make a positive contribution to manifesting Saint Germain's golden age. But that also requires you, in order to make the maximum contribution, to not be pulled into these reactionary patterns. Because what is the maximum contribution you can make to Saint Germain's golden age? It is that you are able to tune in to Saint Germain's mind and receive ideas from him. And the most common mistake I've seen spiritual people make over the years is that they take one of their own opinions, which comes from an unbalanced view, and they project it upon the Ascended Master. Surely this is what Saint Germain wants. Surely Saint Germain wants what I think the earth should be. But that may not be the case. It may not be the case at all. And how will you know? Only when you're neutral. And what does it mean to be neutral? It means to be balanced. You are not pulled in this direction or that direction. You are, instead of projecting, oh, this is what Saint Germain thinks. This is how Saint Germain wants it done. You go into neutral and say, Saint Germain, what do you actually want? And then you can receive that if you're neutral. And I have experienced many, many times that there are students who come to Ascended Master teachings, they have these very strong opinions, and Ascended Master says something, I have them both in the Summit Lighthouse and through me, the Ascended Master says something that these people don't like, and now they go into a negative reaction. Oh, this messenger isn't a messenger, or this was a false teaching, or the Ascended Master, I've heard so many times, the Ascended Masters would never say that. And how do you know what the Ascended Masters would say if you're not balanced? Because the one thing you can know with absolute certainty, the Ascended Masters are balanced. They are neutral, or they wouldn't be Ascended Masters. They would be the false masters here on earth who think they know everything better than God. So, okay. So the way to find balance is to realize that your lack of balance comes from these separate selves. So let's look at a typical example. I found the spiritual path when I was 18. My first spiritual movement was Transcendental Meditation. In Transcendental Meditation, they first, like the outer facade that presented to the public, we have this easy to practice technique that gives you deep relaxation, and it has all these benefits, including health benefits. But once you got into the movement, there was a spiritual overlay that Transcendental Meditation was the most efficient way to raise your consciousness and achieve cosmic consciousness. And the way to do this was to meditate more, to take meditation courses, to become a meditation teacher, to become a governor of the age of enlightenment. In other words, there was this, it was never enough. You could always meditate more. You can always take more advanced courses. You could learn more advanced meditation techniques, how to levitate your body, for example, or how to get the strength of an elephant. Not something I ever wanted, by the way. So it was like this treadmill. It's never enough. You could always do more. And I saw many people, and myself included to some degree, but not as much as I saw other people, that went into this completely unbalanced reaction, where their whole lives were geared towards making enough money that they could take the next meditation course. And then when they were at home, they were meditating 3 or 4 hours a day, so they didn't have time to have any kind of relationship, or they tried not to work, but of course they were trapped. If they didn't work, they couldn't make the money for the next course, and so forth and so on. So you had this very, very unbalanced reaction. Then in my second spiritual movement, Ascended Master movement called the Summit Lighthouse, we were decreeing. We were invoking spiritual light from the Ascended Masters. And again, you could never do enough decrees. I remember coming to the headquarters of the Summit Lighthouse in Montana, and there was all these demands. You had to get up to go to morning decrees at 5 o'clock in the morning, decree for an hour and a half, then eat breakfast, then go to work for at least 8 hours, for many people more. Then you were supposed to go to decrees in the evening. But there were also some decrees you should do beyond these daily decrees. And then there were 4 nights a week where there were special services, 4-hour services in the night. So I remember at one point thinking about this, and I thought, if I'm supposed to do everything that's demanded here, not only decrees, but also do the actual work, 24 hours a day isn't enough to do all this, because you're also supposed to study the teachings, of course, and chew your macrobiotic dinner 108 times each mouthful. And so you can see it quickly added up to 24 hours a day wasn't enough. And so what I'm saying is, you know, again, you could go into this obsessive compulsive reaction. And I did, because I didn't do everything, but I did a lot. And I did a lot more than I really should have done, given that I also had other obligations in life, like being a parent and this and that. So what I'm saying is, it's very common that people find a spiritual movement and they become obsessive compulsive about doing the practices and studying the teachings and doing everything that this movement prescribes. I mean, look at how many people have found an Indian guru and they've had to go off to India to his ashram. And this is also a very unbalanced lifestyle for most people, because they have to leave behind whatever obligations they have in the West, and again, it takes money to be there and this and that. So you have an awful lot of people in the last 40, 50 years or more who have gone into this very unbalanced approach to the spiritual path. And what you see in many, many people is that they decide with the outer mind, this is how I am going to practice the practice in this movement. This is how much time I'm going to devote to it, because I want to reach this promised goal, whether it's cosmic consciousness or whatever it may be. And so they go into this unbalanced reaction, and from the very beginning it's a strain. But as time moves on, it often becomes more and more of a strain. And many times they even make it worse, because they're thinking, but I haven't yet had the breakthrough I'm looking for. I haven't reached cosmic consciousness. I must meditate more. I must do more decrees. I must do more exercises. And when does it stop? When does it stop? Well, if you take a rubber band and stretch it, and keep stretching it, and keep stretching it, what is going to happen sooner or later? The rubber band breaks. It snaps. And that's what I've seen happen to a lot of people. They are in such tension, it is so hard for them to maintain this, what do you want to call it, regime that they have put themselves in, that suddenly something snaps. It can be a little thing. It can be they get insulted by somebody else in a movement, or they get insulted by something the guru said, or that they didn't get the attention they wanted. They're not treated with the respect and validation they think they should have. It could be all kinds of little things. But it's simply that the rubber band has been stretched so far that they snap. And now they often go into another unbalanced reaction of blaming the guru, blaming the organization, becoming very critical and hateful of it, and blaming the spiritual path, thinking the spiritual path is a fraud, and they totally leave the spiritual path. So in other words, they go from one unbalanced extreme to the opposite. And, in a sense you could say, why are you even talking about this? If this is what people need to do, let them do it. Yeah, but is it what people need to do? Because what I've also seen in many people is that after going first too far to one side and then too far from another, they finally find some balance. And then they always think, oh, why didn't I find this earlier? Why did I have to be so extreme? Why couldn't I have seen this, what I see now, 10 years ago? So maybe by talking about it, it will help some people see it before they have to swing back and forth too many times. And so what is behind this lack of balance? Well, there is, of course, in essence, an unresolved psychology. And I think it very much relates to what I talk about in my avatar videos, where I talk about how many of us who are spiritual people, we came to Earth from another planet to hold a certain spiritual balance here. And then we were exposed to this very, very vicious attack from the fallen beings We were ignored by the people we were trying to help so they could overcome suffering. And so we go into feeling rejected, feeling very disappointed, and and some people just give up trying to change others. But many of us who are spiritual people, the reason we are spiritual, the reason why we find the spiritual movement, is that we haven't given up on this desire to have a positive impact on earth. So here we are, we grow up in these Western societies or modern democracies where we don't have any knowledge of a spiritual path. And we still have this inner longing, this inner sense that life has a purpose, our life has a specific purpose, we are here to do something positive. Then we find this spiritual movement that tells us, yes, there is a purpose, you can be part of changing the earth, you just need to meditate, or you need to invoke spiritual light, or you need to chant, or whatever it may be. And this now, even though we had the sense before that there was something that was missing in our lives, now it opens, our sense was sort of suppressed. So in a way, our wound was suppressed also. It was covered over because there was no outlet for it. But now that we find that there is a spiritual path, there's a spiritual movement, our wound is uncovered. And we feel the wound again. And it's overwhelming for us, very difficult to deal with, but we can suppress it. We can deal with it by saying, yes, now I found the spiritual path. Here I am. This is what I'm meant to do. I'm meant to meditate. I'm meant to decree. And then I'll make it. So I don't have to look at the wound. But see, any wound we have, and especially these, as I call it, the cosmic burst trauma that we received when we came to Earth and were exposed to this, really an attempt to destroy us, any wound is unbalanced. Because the reason why we got wounded was that we had an unbalanced reaction. Now, as I said in my avatar videos, it's very understandable that we had this unbalanced reaction to this very unbalanced attack on us. Nevertheless, what the spiritual path is all about is to overcome the wound, heal the wound, come back to balance, so we can actually hold the spiritual balance for Earth that we are meant to hold. You see what I'm saying? We came here not, as we often thought, to help people overcome suffering. We actually came here to stay balanced, stay neutral, and just hold that spiritual balance by being here. But we were forced out of that, and we allowed ourselves to come out of that by reacting, by creating these subconscious selves. And honestly, I've been on the spiritual path for 48 years, and I have been looking as deeply into my own psychology as I think I can. Perhaps there's things I haven't seen yet, but I have seen a lot. And nothing really helped me find balance until I started looking at this original birth trauma and started to consider my attitude to Earth. And I even went beyond, after healing the birth trauma, to looking at what was my attitude when I came to Earth. Because I came here thinking suffering is wrong and I need to help people overcome suffering. I need to help remove these kinds of suffering from Earth. And I'll talk about more of that in the videos. But what I'm trying to say is, there is a very deep wound in you that relates to you coming to Earth and being attacked. And that is what creates a lack of balance in your psychology, in your subconscious mind. And until you see and heal that wound, you won't be able to find balance. You will keep going back and forth. If you can see in your life that you have gone back and forth, then it's because you haven't looked for that wound. And my avatar videos talk about this. I also have some books, especially one called Healing Your Spiritual Traumas, that has techniques for helping you heal this. So it's definitely doable. And I know quite a number of people who have used these teachings and tools and who have received amazing healing from it and found much more of a balanced approach. So what I'm trying to say here is, the deepest imbalance you have in your being is your initial reaction to coming to Earth and experiencing this how difficult, how dense this planet is, and how there are people on this planet that are so evil that they will do anything they can to destroy you, spiritually, psychologically, even physically. And the shock of this is what created the initial imbalance in you. But it can be healed. It takes work, it takes groveling, but it can be healed. And that's when you can start to find balance. Because until then, really, whatever I say here will give you maybe an intellectual understanding of balance. But you can't intellectualize your way to balance. You have to heal the wound that pulls you away from balance. Now, I want to go a little bit further, because I want to go into a little bit more of a philosophical discussion here. Because what I have experienced with spiritual people is that we very easily get pulled into adapting these black and white simplistic viewpoints. And it has to do with the fact that our wound made us unbalanced. So many people have been polarized into the black and white thinking. There are also many people that have been spiritual people have been polarized into gray thinking, where they basically, you can basically see there are some people that have this attitude, oh, it's all good. I don't know how many times I heard it. It's all good, right? But look at the planet. Is it all good? I mean, how can you say that on a planet like this? But this is because they've gone into gray thinking, where they are basically saying, oh, if I don't have any strong opinions, then I'm not being confronted by these people who have these negative views, and then I can slide under the radar, and I can just sit in my little ashram and meditate and feel that I'm a spiritual person. Then there are other people that are pulled into the black and white. They have their very strong opinions, and in my view, they are actually growing more than the ones who go into this gray thinking, where they don't want to take a stand for anything. So they are potentially going more, but they can, as I said, be pulled into this very unbalanced reaction. And the reason for this is that they think there is an absolute truth on earth. And my guru has the absolute truth, and my teaching has the absolute truth. And this is just the way it is. This is black and white, right? This is a black and white viewpoint. And what black and white thinking does, it simplifies everything. Every aspect in life is simplified into a question that can be answered with a yes or no. Black and white thinking is binary thinking. You know, with computers, right? There's a 1 and a 0. Nothing in between. No gradations. 1 and 0. And that's black and white thinking. So, the Bible is the Word of God. Anything else is of the devil. My guru has the absolute truth. Anyone who disagrees with him is of the devil. A lot of spiritual people I have met, including myself for many years, thought they were better than the fundamentalist Christians. But if you're a fundamentalist, it doesn't really matter what you're a fundamentalist about. You are in black and white thinking. So, what am I really saying? Well, I actually have a breakthrough video where I talk about truth. So you can watch that if you want more about this. But what I'm trying to say is that truth is not something that can be defined with words once and for all. Truth is actually something that changes over time. Now, in order to understand this, we need to know something about how the world was created. I have a video called How the World Was Created. If you haven't watched it and you want to understand this, you need to watch that video. But I'm going to give you a few things here. One of the most powerful symbols we have on this planet is this. The Tai Chi from Taoism. There's a circle, there's the two fields intertwined, black and white. But this isn't black and white thinking because of these two dots. White dot in the black dot in the white. It actually shows you it's not a matter of going into black or white. And the whole idea of Taoism is that the two forces are complementary. They complement each other. In the duality consciousness, black and white don't mix. They are opposites. They oppose each other. The two dualistic extremes can only destroy each other. Only they can't actually, because they are both created out of an illusion, and one illusion can't destroy another. Reality can dispel the illusion. But in order to see the reality, you have to look beyond the black and white thinking and the gray thinking. So, okay, Taoism. What Taoism actually explains is that the world was created out of two forces. And the way I explain this in some of my videos about how the world works is, here's the creator. There's this created being. And the creator doesn't have what we can call form when it starts. It doesn't have anything that we can call form from our view. It does have an individuality, it doesn't have an intent, it has a vision for what kind of a creation it wants to create. But it's beyond what we can fathom. So the first thing the creator does in order to create anything is that it creates what I have called the one mind, or the Christ mind, or the Buddha nature. It's a mind that has one function: to unify any form in the creator's world of form with the creator. Because everything that's created after the one mind is created out of the one mind. And therefore, any form that's ever been created, if you look behind the form, within the form, you can see the one mind, and through the one mind you can see that everything in this world of form came from the Creator's being. Nothing can be separated from the Creator in reality. It can in our minds, because we have free will, but that's coming later. Nothing can actually be separated. Okay, so the Creator first creates the one mind, and then the Creator creates two forces, the yin and the yang. And there is an outgoing force, and there's a contracting force. You can call the outgoing force the masculine or father aspect. You can call the contracting force the feminine or mother aspect. But these are kind of words. I prefer to be neutral and say there's an outgoing, there's a contracting. You think about it. The scientific community today believes in the doctrine, the religious doctrine of the Big Bang, where they say creation started when everything was concentrated in a singularity. Then there was the Big Bang, where everything was hurled outwards in a giant explosion. What they don't understand, can't explain, is how did structures begin to form after the initial explosion? Why didn't everything that was there in the beginning just continue to expand indefinitely? You see an explosion in slow motion of something being blown up, and everything is just hurled outwards. Do you ever see it start forming structures? No, it's just blown to bits. Why didn't the Big Bang just continue outwards? Well, because what started the Big Bang, I'm not saying it's an accurate description they have right now, it will obviously be refined, but nevertheless, what started the Big Bang was the outgoing force, the expanding force. But what caused structures to start to form, elementary particles, atoms, molecules, planets, stars, galaxies, was the contracting force. So in other words, in order for any form to be created, both forces are needed, and they need to work in a unity, in interaction, like depicted in the Tai Chi. But what is the important part of the interaction? It is balance between the two forces. If there's not balance, things will keep expanding and be blown apart. If there's too much of the expanding force, things will be blown apart. If there's too much of the contracting force, things will contract, eventually form a black hole, and all structures are broken down again. So you see that in order for a form to be created and be sustained over time, there has to be a balance between the expanding and the contracting forces. What defines that balance? The one mind, the Christ mind. That is what creates balance. So, as I explained in my video about how the world was created, Earth was created by a group of ascended masters called the Elohim. They defined a certain Christ balance, a certain balance between the expanding and contracting forces that made it possible to create Earth in its original form. In its original form, it was much higher than it is today, higher vibration, matter wasn't as dense, people didn't have to work for a living as described in some of these myths about a paradise lost. And then, as I also explained, there was a fall in people's consciousness. The inhabitants of the earth, they fell to a lower state of consciousness, went into duality. And what happened when the inhabitants of the earth went into duality was they lost the balance of the one mind. And now they started co-creating in a very unbalanced way. And that's what's caused the matter to densify. So there's now seemingly a lack of resources, there's poverty, people have to struggle against nature, people have to struggle against each other. All of this is created out of this lack of balance. Because there's now not the balance between the expanding and the contracting forces. And therefore, you see things beginning to deteriorate. You basically have the second law of thermodynamics, which has been discovered by science. What that law says is that in a closed system, things will break down. A closed system will self-destruct. And one way to define a closed system is that it's one that has lost contact with the one mind and therefore is balanced. It has gone into some kind of imbalance between the two forces. And this is what you see on Earth. You see some people who have a lack of balance in the expanding force. They have too strong of in the expanding force. They want to conquer the world, force everybody to conform to their vision. You have other people on Earth who don't want any kind of change. They have an imbalance in the contracting force. They don't want to change. They don't want anything new. They don't believe in progress. They just want to live their lives the way they've always done so. You see people who basically want to live the way in the modern world, the way their forefathers lived 500 years ago, except they want to have their cell phones. So you can see all of these imbalances around the planet. But what is it that creates the imbalance? Is it nature, as we often believe? No. It's not nature. It's human beings. Because human beings, we are, as I explained in several videos, we are self-aware. We have the potential to contact the Christ mind, to expand our connection to the one mind, whereby, as we expand our connection to the one mind, we become more and more balanced. We have more and more balance between the expanding and contracting forces. That's really what balance means. You have a balance between the expanding and contracting forces. So now back to this idea that there is only one truth and my guru has given it. Why is that a flawed idea? It's because right now you have a very unbalanced state on Earth. And why is that important? Because in order to understand this, you have to understand what the Buddha meant when he talked about the interdependent originations. And what the Buddha said 2,500 years ago was basically the same that quantum physics is saying today. We live in a world where everything is connected. Now you think about this. You go back 150 years And most scientists who thought they were the smartest people on earth and knew everything, they believed that matter and energy were two separate things that could not interact or unite. And then comes Einstein, E equals mc squared, basically says everything is energy. Matter is just another form of energy. That means everything is made out of energy. And that means everything is connected. And scientific experiments have shown that particles can be separated by great distance, but they still act as a whole. A change in one particle instantly leads to a change in the other, because they are connected. So, we need to understand here that all human beings are connected through this web of energy. We can call it the collective consciousness, if you want to put a word on it. But even deeper, there is this web of energy, that we are all connected. Why is this important? Because right now, the collective consciousness on Earth is in a very unbalanced state. There are all of these imbalanced viewpoints, ideologies, belief systems, religions, that are all imbalanced. How are we going to improve Earth? How are we going to improve Earth? Many of us as spiritual people, we dream about improving Earth. But what does it actually mean? We think, especially when we find a guru who says so, because he believes it, we think, oh, we have to find this one truth that this guru has and make everybody else believe this one truth. Can we not just step back for a minute and ask ourselves, what's causing all the conflict on Earth? Look back at history. What's causing most conflict? There was this group of people who thought, we have the only truth and we have to force everybody to accept our truth, and then we'll solve all problems on Earth. Christianity is the only true religion. No, Islam is the only true religion. Communism is the only true political philosophy. Can we not step back and see that it is this mindset of wanting to force other people to conform to one idea that has created all the conflicts? And if we as spiritual people continue that pattern, we are not contributing to raising the earth to a higher level. We are just contributing to the conflict, to the lack of balance. Can we really not get to the point where we see this? Is it that difficult to see this when you're a spiritual person? So what I'm saying is, how do we change the earth? By recognizing that right now, the earth is very, very imbalanced. And you cannot take earth from its present level to up here in one giant leap. You need to look at where is the earth at? Or rather, you need to look at, here's a group of people. Where are they at? And then you need to look at the beliefs they have. And then you contact the Christ mind, the one mind, and from the Christ mind you receive an idea that addresses these people's current beliefs, as unbalanced as they are, but helps them take a step higher. Then there's another group of people over here. They have another unbalanced belief. The Christ mind can give an idea that addresses these people's current beliefs and take them a step higher. It may be that if you compare these two with the linear mind, it may seem as if the Christ mind is giving contradictory ideas. But that's because the people have contradictory beliefs. And the goal of the Christ mind is not to bring forth one absolute truth, but to help all people go from wherever they are at now to a higher level of consciousness. That's the goal of the Christ mind. And that is what took me 25 years or more to grasp. And I've seen many people who have been on the path for decades who haven't grasped it. And I've seen many spiritual teachers, self-proclaimed spiritual gurus out there who haven't grasped this one simple reality. And this is the interdependent originations, right? You can't give an absolute truth on a planet like Earth. You have to give an idea that raises people a step up. Then when they have gone up there, you can give them a high idea that takes them to the next step. Then you can give a high idea that takes them to the next step, if they're willing. So what I'm also saying is not only the Christ mind is not seeking to give an absolute truth, but what you receive from the Christ mind will change over time. And what is it that many spiritual people go into when you find your first spiritual movement? Oh, here is the absolute spiritual teaching. I'm going to believe in this for the rest of my life and then I'll be okay. That is not personal Christhood. That is not balance. You're basically saying, oh, hey, I'm glad I found this spiritual path. And now I understand this spiritual path, what it's all about, with my present level of consciousness. So, don't bother me anymore. I already know what's the highest truth. I've figured it all out now. I have this outer teaching. I just keep practicing and doing this and then I'll be okay. That's not reality. Reality is that if you take a valid spiritual teaching and practice and apply it, you will rise to a high level of consciousness. At that level of consciousness, you need to reach for the one mind, the Christ mind, to get a higher truth that will take you to the next step up. And this is what you keep doing for the rest of the time you're on this planet. If you think you reach some ultimate level, you're off the beam. You are off the beam and you're not making maximum progress. So, it's a continual process. When I was new on the spiritual path, of course I thought, well, I never really thought it in transcendental meditation because I could see there was something that was missing. But when I found the Ascended Master teaching in Summit Life, I thought, oh yes, this is the ultimate teaching. This is the highest spiritual teaching on the planet. Here's everything I need. But I have since then received so many ideas from the Christ mind that go beyond what was taught in the Summit Lighthouse and most other spiritual teachings I've found. And I am continually, almost on a daily basis, certainly on a weekly basis, receiving some kind of insight about myself, about my own psychology, about the way I look at the world, that takes me a step up. And I have long ago made peace with the fact that this is the way it's going to be for the rest of my lifetime. I'm not going to reach, as long as I'm in embodiment on this planet, I'm not going to reach an ultimate state of consciousness. For that matter, there is no ultimate state of consciousness except the Creator, but the Creator is expanding its state of consciousness by having created our world. So even that is not ultimate. There is nothing that stands still. That's also what the in the interdependent originations actually says. So, so you see what I'm saying here? When you go into believing that you have found an ultimate spiritual teaching and you have the ultimate understanding of the spiritual path, this is an unbalanced reaction, and it stops or at least slows down your growth. So back to what I said in the beginning. Why did some people have such a strong reaction about vaccine or the election in 2020 in the US? Because they were unbalanced. How are you gonna move forward on the spiritual path if you've been pulled into one of these reactions? I'm not trying to blame people for it. I'm just saying if you can see you've been pulled into any kind of unbalanced reaction, how are you going to move forward? By being willing to question what your outer mind determined must be the absolute truth. If you're not willing to question what your outer mind decided was the black and white truth, you can't grow beyond that point. You will be off the beam, you will be rolling around in a quicksand, and you're going to be sinking rather than rising. It's that simple. Again, I'm not trying to talk about viewpoints here. Okay, I'm not trying to prove anything about vaccines or the 2020 election or any other issue. I'm only saying, if you're a spiritual person, if you have a desire to help this planet grow, you can only do this by striving for balance, meaning going into a neutral state of mind. And instead of allowing these strong black and white opinions in the world to pull you into that reaction or that reaction, you reach for the Christ mind. And then you receive some idea from the Christ mind that takes you and perhaps other people a step higher. And I have seen people claim, oh, but I have the opinion I have because this is my Christhood I'm expressing. But if you're into this black and white thinking, it's not Christhood. That's what I'm trying to explain here. The Christhood is not claiming you have the absolute truth. Christhood is giving people whatever they need to come up one step higher, instead of having this black and white judgment that anybody who disagrees with you is wrong. The Christ is very subtle, because the purpose of the Christ mind is, as I said, not to bring forth an absolute truth, but to raise specific people who are in a specific state of illusion to the next step up, depending on what they can handle. And what we so often do as spiritual people is that we become Bible thumpers. The Christians out there hitting people over the head with the Bible. We are doing the same with our spiritual teachings. And that's an unbalanced reaction. And I could probably go on, but what's the point? If any of this resonates with you, then you have enough here to at least start the process. I'm not saying anybody can complete this. I don't consider myself as I've completed this process. You know, I'm continually reaching for the Christ mind, and my viewpoints are shifting somewhat over time. So, but I'm just saying, anybody who's willing, you can start this process of, first of all, realizing that what you are really striving for is balance. And balance means that you're not pulled into any of the reactions that come from the duality consciousness, the illusion of separation. You're not pulled into these strong black and white opinions. You're not either pulled into a gray thinking reaction to everything. So you need to find that very straight and narrow path that shifts all the time from issue to issue exactly where it is. So you can't allow your ego to make you think you have the ultimate truth. This is what the ego always wants, because ultimately the ego wants security. And it's seeking to gain security by elevating something in this world, a religion, a political philosophy, scientific materialism, whatever it is, to the ultimate status. If I'm following this political candidate, I have the truth. I'm always right. If I believe in this ideology, if I belong to this religion, if I follow this guru, if I believe in this spiritual teaching, if I do this practice, then I'll make it. But that is the ego seeking security, and the only way to actually be secure is that you reach for the Christ mind, the one mind. This is what Jesus said. He who is willing to lose his life for my sake shall find it, the life of the Christ mind, which is real life. But he who seeks to save his outer life, the dualistic life, shall lose it. And yeah, I mean, it's just a stunning reality once you see it, but it's also an extremely liberating reality once you see it. And just to round it off, I know it's been long, but what allows you to see it? What allows you to contact the Christ mind? Well, what I have explained in a number of my videos is the real core of your identity, who you really are, is your spiritual self, your I am presence, which exists in the lower spiritual realm. Then you have your outer personality, which has 4 levels: the identity mind, the mental mind, the emotional mind, and the physical. And in this outer mind is defined what most people call their personality. This is who most people believe they are, the contents of the outer mind. But all of those contents were created in reaction to Earth. How were they created? Because the I am presence can't descend into embodiment. So it sends an extension of itself, which are called the conscious you. And the conscious you then reacts to things on earth and creates these outer selves. I also explain this in more detail in other videos. But the point I want to make here is this, that when the conscious you descends, it is neutral, and it has some sense of connection to the one mind. And as I've explained, the conscious you can create all of these outer selves and step into them and experience life through them. But you can never lose your ability to become aware that you are more than the outer self, you are the conscious you, and you can step outside of the outer selves and experience yourself as neutral awareness. And when you do this, you can also experience yourself as connected to the Christ mind, your higher self, the ascended masters, and even the Creator. So my point is, the essence of who you are as the lower being here is the conscious you, which is neutral awareness. That's why you have the ability to step outside all of the outer selves and connect to the one mind, the Buddha nature, the Christ mind. And this is what allows you to avoid being pulled into a dualistic reaction by the demons of Mara, by other people, by ideas and ideologies. And it's just a matter of becoming aware, as I've said in several videos. You can become aware right now that you've been sitting here watching this video. You can mentally step back and observe yourself watching this video. Well, that's activating, so simple, the conscious you ability to see that, oh, I'm more than this physical body. I'm actually more than my emotions, my mental mind, and even my deepest sense of identity here on earth. I'm more than all of this. I can step outside of it. And when you step outside of it, you are not identified with your outer opinions. You suddenly see, you experience, oh, I thought it was so important about the US election or vaccines, but I now see there's something that's much more important, and that's my connection to the one mind. And when you experience that your connection to the one mind is much more important than any opinion that's out there in the outer mind, in these subconscious selves, that's when you have a whole different frame of reference, a whole different way of evaluating these outer opinions. You say, oh, but it's just something I took on. It's not some ultimate opinion. It doesn't define me. It doesn't define who I am. And how are you going to be spiritual? How are you going to graduate from earth? Unless you come to the point where you realize nothing on earth defines me. Because if you think that your loyalty to a particular presidential candidate or a particular idea about this or that or the next thing defines who you are not ready to leave the earth behind. And if you're not ready, that's fine. That's your free will choice. I'm just saying that if you are attached to these outer viewpoints and at the same time think you are making maximum spiritual progress and you will eventually make your ascension after this lifetime, you are fooling yourself. You are simply fooling yourself. And if that's what you want to do, again, no problem. No problem. But at least now you have a choice.